First, I didn't think anything of Mushoku Tensei. It seemed like just another seasonal isekai that people would forget about within a couple of weeks. Isekai isn't even a genre that I'm really interested in either. I've only seen two of them, which is Konosuba and No Game No Life, but both of those are more like comedies than isekai. So there was quite literally nothing about Mushoku Tensei that stuck out or appealed to me at first. Especially since during the part of the story that's been adapted in the anime, there isn't really like a main selling point you could tell people to get them invested. Take Code Geass. This kid gets mind control powers and uses them to overthrow the government, and the opening slaps. Death Note. This kid gets a notebook that kills anybody whose name he writes in it and he uses it to kill criminals. What an interesting concept. I sure hope there isn't a really shitty part in the middle that happens to be named, oh I don't know, the Yotsuba group arc. But Mushoku Tensei, yeah, this guy gets reincarnated as a kid and then he reads books and he goes outside. Bro, what the fuck? If you're like me, you'd go, yeah, whatever, and just ignore Mushoku Tensei. Especially since anime fans love to hype up whatever new seasonal show with a cute girl comes out, and then give it a 10 out of 10 after 2 episodes and write an entire thesis on Mal about why it's the best show ever. Like, modern anime is already overrun with mountains upon mountains of garbage isekai, and it feels like every 10 seconds there's someone going, trust me, I know it seems stupid, but this is the really good one, it isn't like the rest. Which is ironically exactly what this video is. I've become exactly what I swore to destroy. So one day when I felt like starting a new show but was too indecisive to pick something for my watch list, decided to watch Mushoku Tensei. Just so I could know what everyone was talking about and be able to form my own opinion on it. And you know what? I thought it was pretty good. The animation and sound design were amazing, and the fact that Tomokazu Sugita, I know I'm butchering that, who voices Gintoki, voiced the adult Rudy narration voice is also a nice little touch. Even before the displacement incident happened, I still really enjoy the show for all of its slow moments, like Rudy celebrating his birthday or teaching Eris magic and how to read. It's probably because I'm a huge slice of life fan and get off from seeing characters washing dishes, but a lot of my favorite moments from the first season were like the slower moments, like the 3-month period they spent in the Beast Forest during the rainy season, or when all the characters took a day off and went shopping. Mushoku Tensei still didn't really like blow me away though, and during that time period after I finished the anime but before I read the light novels, I just remembered it as the nice cozy fantasy show. During that time though, I do specifically remember liking 2 scenes. The first being when Eris and Rudeus are sparring, and despite all the effort she's been putting in with Ruijerd and all the improvements she's been making, Rudy's still able to quickly beat her because of his demon eye he got a few days ago. And Eris, who's been shown so far to be extremely confident and stubborn, and she's always looking for some reason to start a fight, starts to break down crying and then she angrily storms off, and it hits so hard because it's such a relatable feeling. In anime, there's this really annoying trope of if you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything, and the characters are always able to beat whatever villain or barrier they're facing just by training a bunch off screen, and very few anime break this trend and acknowledge the depressing and realistic fact that no, fuck you. You can try your absolute best, put in as much work as humanly possible, and completely surpass all of your own expectations, but there will still be someone way better than you who is not only already at that level of skill you spent all this time working your ass off for, but who got there with barely any effort on their part and who has much greater potential and growth than you ever will. We all tell ourselves that this doesn't matter. We all know that there's someone out there way better than us at anything we do in life. But whenever it's someone you personally know, like Eris with Rudy, for some reason it hurts a lot more than seeing someone you don't know. Oh look, this 14-year-old on the internet makes more money than both of my parents just by dancing in front of his phone. Who cares? Hey, hold the fucking phone. My friend just bought a video game with their own money. I'm a failure to everyone around me, and I will never achieve anything. The only other anime besides Mushoku Tensei that I've seen this issue kind of addressed in is in Pet Girl of Sakura Hall and Demon Slayer, and I already know that all 3 people who've watched Pet Girl of Sakura Hall are losing their fucking minds right now. In Pet Girl of Sakura Hall, the characters are shown trying their absolute hardest and giving their respective interests their all, and the main character Sorata sees this and thinks, man, all these people are so much more talented and hardworking than I'll ever be, but I doubt I'll ever get there, but I should still try a little harder. And you know what happens? they all lose. Sorata puts in a bunch of effort but still fails to get his video game approved because as hard as he works, he's still a beginner, and despite pulling constant all-nighters and pushing her body to the limits working for months in preparation, Aoyama still doesn't get her role as a voice actor. And I mean, yeah, it sucks, but that's just life sometimes. And it's nice to see an anime where the characters realize that sometimes hard work just isn't enough and there's going to be someone better than you regardless of what you do. Anime is Demon Slayer, and during this scene in Mugen Train after Goku dies, Tanjiro is mad at himself for not being strong enough, and he says that he feels like as soon as he gets over a mental and physical wall and masters something, he sees people fighting a bunch of walls beyond him who are still struggling, and he doubts that he can ever get to that point because he sees the gap between them and realizes that even if he gets to the point of those other people, it still won't be enough because there's just that much of a strength gap between demons and humans. That's actually one thing I appreciate about Demon Slayer a lot that people don't talk about enough. No matter how much a human trains, there's still a massive gap between them and demons. And strength standards are way beyond human standards, and so the characters really give their all and get the shit beaten out of them, while the demons are just chilling there the whole fight. Even with all of the Hashira fighting Muzan in the upper moons, it's still just barely enough, and only Giyu and Sanemi are the ones who make it out alive. And yes, don't worry, I didn't forget about the topic, because the other moment from Mushoku Tensei that really stuck with me are the scenes where Paul is shown scolding Rudy. First for bullying other kids, and then the second when Rudy comes back from the demon continent and they meet in Millis. Now, Paul is really interesting because if you look at him objectively, he's a shitty person, but he's still a great character, oddly enough. Even if you don't agree with what he does, the anime still shows you his perspective and gives you an idea as to at least why he is the way that he is. He yelled at Rudy and hit him near the beginning because he didn't know the full story and wanted to teach Rudy not to attack people for no reason, because that was something Paul did when he was younger and he wants Rudy to be better than him. And Paul does learn the full story, he swallows his pride and apologizes for not hearing Rudy out. Then later on, when Rudy and Paul reunite in Millis and they get into an argument, initially, you're right there with Rudy, and you think to yourself, fuck you, Paul. But then, you see Paul's side of the story, and even though what he did isn't right or justified, you can at least feel empathy for him because eventually he regrets it and wants to change. No matter how good of a parent you try to be, you're still gonna fuck up your kids somehow. You can be the opposite of your parents, but that's still gonna provide its whole own set of issues. Say you had really strict parents who never let you do anything. Well, when you become a parent, you'll think, I'll give my kid a lot of freedom to do whatever they want so they can have the childhood that I didn't. But then your kid ends up feeling like you don't care about them and aren't invested in their lives, despite you parenting like that because you care about them. It's just this whole big clusterfuck. And that's what happens with Paul here. He tries to not be like his father and decides to raise Rudy strictly, but that still creates conflict between them because that's just how parenting works out. But despite everything else he's done, Paul was still able to do something that 90% of parents refuse to do, which is back down, apologize, admit that he was wrong, and sit down and have an honest conversation with their child instead of getting mad at them. Paul and Rudy are able to acknowledge the miscommunication between them, and they work together to move past it. And all of this happens in an anime of all things, where typically the parents are either dead, never mentioned, or are complete pieces of shit. And to see an actually fleshed out and honest relationship between a parent and their child was so fucking cool. Improvement is really the heart and soul of what makes Mushoku Tensei great. Every character you see changes and develops over time in some way, and even if you compare their first and last appearances and just a tiny little bit of story that's been shown in the anime so far, they've all undergone some development. By the end of the season, Eris isn't nearly as stuck up or violent as she was at the beginning, and she's improved her swordplay a lot. Paul tries to do his best and keep Norn safe and tries to find Rudy and Zenith. Ruijerd learns not to just kill indiscriminately. So by the way, Ruijerd is literally just fucking Kratos, like they're the exact same character, look it up. Rudy. By golly, Rudy. Now, despite Mushoku Tensei being one of my favorite pieces of media, I will say that at first, Rudy is really uncomfortable to watch, and a lot of the shit he does is wrong, and I'm not at all defending any of it. I'm also not entirely sure about the legality of someone with the mind of a 30-year-old, but the body of a child, having a crush on another 30-year-old who has the body of a middle schooler. Like, someone here is a pedophile, but I don't know who. Even if Rudy's efforts to improve himself and use this new chance at life as efficiently as possible, there are things he does and says early on that are just plain uncomfortable. I read an interview with the author about Rudy, and he said that he was tired of seeing sexuality depicted as this kind of like sacred thing and wanted to show a more uncomfortable side of it that not many Japanese media explore. And so considering that the intent was to make it uncomfortable, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that it's uncomfortable. But I feel like people were quick to ignore that all the other characters were horny on main as well, like Paul and Zenith or Roxy and Lilia. Plus, in the light novel, there's even a scene during the Demon Continent part where Rudy finds Eris sniffing his dirty clothes when he's taking a shower. So to end this quick discussion on the sexual stuff in the show, anything wrong with fan service like this, but other parts are weird but it's all to the point, so I guess just fuck me, I guess. Rudy does get better later on after the end. Like, what am I saying? He gets better during the anime. Like when he decides not to feel up Eris when he's healing her on the ship, or when he holds back from having sex with her at the end because she had to wait until they were 15. Character development is great in any story, but it's even better when an isekai actually takes advantage of this setting and uses it for the main character to improve himself. 99% of isekai would work just fine if they were turned into a typical fantasy story, because they ignore the main character's previous life and just get to the fantasy part as quickly as possible. What's the point of having a character from another world if you're just going to ignore it and focus on the new one? Like, imagine if I wrote you a story about a human who gets teleported to a distant planet to live with aliens, but he perfectly adjusts to their society, and I do absolutely nothing with the fact that he's from Earth at any point during the story. It's never a sense of conflict, he never misses or wants to go back to Earth, nobody ever learns he's from Earth. You think to yourself, but what was the fucking point of having him be from Earth if you were just gonna make the entire story about the aliens? To which I'd say, yeah, but he has a smartphone with him, therefore it's interesting. That's how I feel about most isekai. It doesn't apply to Mushoku Tensei though. It is one of the few isekai where the story would not be nearly as impactful if you were to remove the isekai element, because the story's main message is that it's never too late to improve yourself. What's more emotionally moving? A story about a kid growing up in a fantasy world, a story about someone who felt that life getting reincarnated as a kid in a fantasy world and who decides to use this new opportunity and setting to improve himself for the better and work past all his previous trauma. Rudy finally going outside would not be nearly as impactful if he was just a kid in a fantasy world who was scared to go outside, instead of someone overcoming trauma they still carry from their previous life. The last thing I'll rave about before the spoiler section is the world building. I'll talk a lot more in depth about this in the second half of this video, but my favorite thing about this series is how it constantly feels like you're learning something new right alongside Rudy. First, there's the introduction of the world itself, then the magic and sword system, then the language system, and then after the displacement incident, you get to see all these different cultures and races that live in this world, which all have their own unique customs, and the best part is that they all actually speak different languages. The producers of this show made entire new languages for the different races. Like when Rudy talks to Roxy's parents, they aren't just making random sounds. The actors actually had to learn and rehearse a fictional language. There's just so much detail and care put into this world, and you're always learning more about it. Even in the final volumes of the series, you go to a whole new part of the world that hasn't been explored yet in the story and learn about a whole new culture and people. How many stories are still developing their world up until the final volume in a completely natural way? Most series try and throw in a bunch of new characters near the end to try and artificially provide progress in the story with no idea how to integrate them beyond that. Like how Code Geass threw in these motherfuckers in season 2, or how Hunter x Hunter introduces like 8 new characters in every arc and then immediately forgets about them. In Mushoku Tensei, you're introduced to new characters in a way that naturally integrates them into the world or progresses the story, because they either come back later for important moments or help provide more insight into a specific aspect of the already massive and established world. And when I say the world in Mushoku Tensei is big, I'm talking fucking humongous. Now, I hate to be that manga douche who's read the whole story and says shit like, you haven't seen anything yet, but genuinely, if you've only seen the anime part of the story, you have not seen anything yet. Not only is Rudy's early life much boring compared to later on, but I'll put it into perspective for you. Anime has only adapted the first 6 of 26 volumes of the story, and even when season 2 comes out, that'll only cover up to volume 12. Which, if you're stupid, means that currently only 1/6 of the story is adapted, and even with all of season 2, it's still gonna be less than half of the story. And if you're really stupid, that'd be the equivalent of me giving you a single slice of pie and then another slice and some crust. And even when you've had all your shitty slices of pie, it still won't cover the overarching plot of the story. Oh, but I thought the plot was for Rudy to find his mom and learn about the displacement incident. Isn't it about reuniting with Roxy, Eris, and Sylphie? Alright, what about going to Magic University? Oh, for fuck! If you've watched the trailer for season 2, then you know that Sophie will appear in the next one, and you also find out about Rudy's mom in season 2, and he'll go to Magic University in season 2. But you're not gonna get a concrete explanation of the displacement incident until the very end of the story. To be honest, I forget exactly when Roxy and Eris come back, but it definitely isn't anytime soon. Mushoku Tensei doesn't have an overarching plot or urgent goal until the end of volume 14, which isn't a spoiler by the way before anybody gets pissed. I'm just saying all this because I know some people are gonna get impatient and ruin the story for themselves by having their expectations for a specific thing to completely ruin the pacing, or looking up an explanation for something instead of just reading the story. Alright? Do not read character wikis, do not watch YouTube videos on character relationships, and do not ruin the story for yourself by looking up an explanation for something. Just read the story for yourself and you'll get all your answers eventually. If you like season 1, you'll love the rest of it. Alright, well, I said everything I could without giving away post-anime spoilers, so unfortunately, this next part of the video is only going to be for the cool kids who read the entire series. Yes, the entire series. Go read all the Mushoku Tensei light novels and then you can sit at our table, you fucking nerd. I'm not sure why I felt so invested the entire time I read Mushoku Tensei. Yeah, I can tell you all the things I love about this story, and I'm going to, but my immersion and interest in this story and these characters went way beyond just simple enjoyment. I've never been as sucked into a piece of media as much as I was with Mushoku Tensei. It completely took over my life. To give you an idea as to how far this went, for a month straight, the only thing I did was binge the series. From June 20th of this year to July 20th, I'd literally do nothing but wake up and immediately read whatever volume I happened to be on until I fell asleep and then repeat it the next day. I even read the story while I was eating. That's how badly I couldn't put it down. And I finished volumes anywhere between 1 to 3 days, and I finished the last 5 in 5 days. Thank God it was summer and I had the time to do this, because otherwise I would not be able to be a functioning member of society. Have you ever experienced or done anything similar with a story before, where I would pick it up in the morning and then just not put it down until I went to sleep? And dude, I had the hardest post-nut clarity when I finished the story. After I read that last word, I legitimately just had to sit there and take a second for myself and readjust myself to the baffling reality of consciousness. It wasn't in a depressing way or anything. I'm way beyond that phase of being sad after I finish something. But for a whole month, I was literally living someone else's life in a rich fantasy world, but with all the boring, mundane things in day-to-day life. You can probably see why I had to take a smoke break after I finished it. You see Rudy fight all these cool battles or explore this ever-expanding world, all these cool characters, yet you also see him do a bunch of normal things, like celebrating birthdays, or going to a friend's wedding, and buying a house and throwing a welcome party, or visiting his parent-in-law to show him his kid. Like, I said this before, but you're quite literally stepping into someone else's life in Mushoku Tensei, and even though it includes all these somewhat mundane, everyday things, Mushoku Tensei does this while still managing to tell a cohesive story and be interesting the entire time. First, it's a slice of life with the Magic University arc, then it's an action-adventure with the Begrit Continent arc, then it's a day-to-day family drama for a while, yet it all still feels entirely like Mushoku Tensei, and I loved every second of it. The Magic University arc in particular, oh my god, I fucking love that arc. Again, it's probably because I'm a huge slice of life fan and get off to seeing characters doing laundry, but it was so wholesome to see Rudy start making new connections and start his own life after being completely alone when Eris and Ruijerd left. Just seeing him going grocery shopping with Sophie and buying a house with her and them living together and finally reuniting with someone who truly cares about him again, dude, it was fucking amazing. During volume 7, he really was completely alone in the world. Like, Eris and Ruijerd were gone, Paul was looking for his mom who was missing, and what really cemented that feeling was the scene where he goes to the Adventurers Guild and he has to disband Dead End so he can join another part. And you think, man, Rudy's really sunk low, how's he ever gonna recover from this? And then the Magic University arc just fucking right hooks you out of nowhere. I really love that they changed Sophie too, because my least favorite trope in anime is the clumsy, shy girl who can never do anything for herself and constantly needs other people to help her, except you, Komi, I love you. And when they first said that Sophie needed time to mature on her own so she didn't become dependent on Rudy, I thought, oh, okay, that's surprising, but I'm sure they'll make her dependent on him anyway when she comes back. Nah, bro, Sophie comes back and she's an absolute badass. She's not only the best mage in the university, but she even fucking decked one of the Beast Girls when they got in a fight. It was so awesome to see this character who used to be shy and only knew a little magic do a complete 180 and just kick absolute ass and be able to defend herself against anyone who tries to mess with her. There's a lot of little moments I really love from the series, and when I look back and remember Mushoku Tensei, the part I most fondly remember is the Magic University arc. I will admit I did self-insert a little bit during the arc, but like, come on, man. Like, motherfucker was able to buy and renovate a house without it being painfully expensive or tedious. Like, how can you blame me? But of course, then the story takes this nice slice of life energy and then fucking curb stomps it into the ground with Paul's death in Volume 12, which is the first major character death so far. But then Roxy comes and comforts Rudy, and he gets better and decides to marry her. Then 6 months later in Volume 13, everything is wholesome again, and you think the story will go back to that. Aw, Aisha got a pet tree. Aw, Rudy and Nora trading together. That's cute. Oh hey, Rudy and Sophie go on a date to an inn where he reserved a room. Oh god, oh f***! And Volume 14 is also pretty tame. It covers the whole story of Nanahoshi getting sick, which is kinda serious, but it also gets resolved in the same volume, and there are some comedic moments with Kishidaka coming back and Atof just being Atof. And speaking of Nanahoshi, whenever she spoke Japanese, I fucking lost it, dude. I was reading, I jokingly said to myself, how crazy would it be if someone asked Rudy if he speaks Japanese, and then exactly that happened? Anyway, Volume 14 comes and goes, but then the end of Volume 14 comes. And well, for those of you who know, Ratatouille. I don't care how illogical time travel is in stories, I don't care how it doesn't make any sense from a physics or narrative standpoint, the entire Oldius story shattered me as a human being. You see Oldius, and you see that he's obviously a not very put together person. Thanks, I'll be here all night. But then you read his diary and see the events slowly unfold and get worse and worse while revealing why he's like this. Dude, it just fucking hurt. What he did still isn't justified, but you see his side of the story and can at least see how and why he ended up like this. He tries to go get magic to save Roxy, but then Cliff dies on the way back home, and by the time that he does get back home, Roxy's already dead. Sophie tries to help him, but he's scared that he'll end up taking his feelings out on her because of his drinking and drive her away. So he goes out and sleeps with prostitutes, ironically still ends up pushing her away even though he's trying to be considerate of her the whole time in his own fucked up way. Again, not justifying any of this, but seeing his perspectives really provides light as to why he did this. And then when he finally does manage to pull himself together to go apologize to Sophie, finds out that she died and sees her mangled corpse in front of him while people are throwing things at it. I mean, that's already a lot to take in. His best friend died, his wife died, and then when he realized what a piece of shit he was and decided to move on and apologize, he finds out that his other wife died and sees people desecrating her corpse. That's already pretty fucked up, but then as a free trauma DLC, you throw in the fact that Zenith, Lilia, Zenoba, and Aisha were killed too, and you get this great big cacophony of awful things. And then yada yada yada, revenge scheme, yada yada yada, Eris dies, I'll talk about that later. And then he finds out that despite all that effort he spent during every day of his life, he'll never actually be able to reach Hitagami because the opportunity to do so will happen after his lifetime. Alright, so to sum all that up, his best friend died, his two wives died, his mom died, his sister died, his other best friend died, his stepmom died, his one goal in life after all that time turned out to be not even remotely achievable, but despite all that and everything he did, there was still one person who unconditionally loved Oldius, and as soon as he learned that, she died right in front of him protecting him. Again, I'm not saying that indiscriminate killing and rape are ever justified. However, given everything I just said, you can at least see what drove Oldius to that point. On top of being comically depressing, his story is also just terrifying. I mean, imagine seeing a future version of yourself from a world where everyone you hold close is dead, and this version of yourself is so far gone that they commit the worst sins known to man. All because of one choice as insignificant as opening a door that you were seconds away from opening yourself. It must be terrifying to see this evil husk of a man and think, that's me, and be able to relate to the decisions he made. God, can you imagine the regret that Oldius must feel too? Like, I shouldn't have spent all that time chasing Hitagami. I should have made up with Eris sooner. I should have apologized to Sophie. I shouldn't have gone to Millis. I shouldn't have listened to Hitagami and opened that door. Oh my god, man, it's so depressing. Especially the part about Eris. Ever since Rudius was a kid and she first left him, she was under the belief that she didn't like him, and despite her constantly coming back for him, he still pushed her away because of mental state. And then in his 60s, 50 years after she left him, he learns that all this time she still cared about him. Even after she left when they first had sex, even after he became a complete piece of shit and the worst person in the world, even after everyone he loved either died or abandoned him because of his actions, she was still the one person who cared about him and wanted to help him, and she died risking her life to save him. I still can't believe there's people who've read that entire tragic ass story about Oldies and think that the best female character is anyone other than Eris. Unless you've experienced something similar where someone still wants to help you and forgive you after you've massively fucked up, you don't truly know how important people like that are in your life. And to put that in simple terms, Eris, best girl. It isn't even just that story or alternate timeline that cements her as the best female character. It's the way that the author writes from her perspective and shows you her thoughts and doubts. Eris seems like this kind of tropey, tough, and strong character on the outside, and also unrelated, her design after the anime is incredible. I don't care how impractical this outfit would be in actual combat, it's an amazing character design. But anyway, despite being a badass Sword King who fought Orsted, you still see that she has her own doubts. She doesn't feel like she's a good enough wife for Rudy because she can't do housework or contribute like Roxy and Sophie, and also because he's this great mage who's so much stronger than her. But then you see that Rudy feels the exact same way about her and thinks that he isn't good enough for her. Partly because of when she left him as a kid, but also because she put in all these years doing nothing but training to be stronger so she could be with him. Meanwhile, he got 2 other wives and just lived his life during that time. Compared to people like Orsted, he really isn't that strong at all. It's crazy to me how the author is able to write from these super specific character perspectives in a way that's completely believable. How do you so naturally write from the perspective of a younger sister who's living in her older brother's shadow, a maid who became a mistress, or a mother attempting to do anything in her power to fix her daughter's condition, or a drunk father attempting to do better for his kids? And how do you manage to write those last two in a way where you can understand where they're coming from and sympathize with them despite them being garbage human beings? I know this is cheesy, and everyone always says this about every piece of media, but the characters genuinely feel like actual people who have their own doubts and emotions, and their motivations aren't just whatever the story needs for progression. Screw Luke though, he sucks. Telling me you're a personal bodyguard for the princess of the biggest kingdom in the world, but you still lost a sword fight to a mage? Bro, you're fucking dog water. I don't have a smooth transition for this next point. An overlooked part of Mushoku Tensei that kind of makes me sad is that the family was never truly together again like we were at the beginning before the displacement incident. Aisha and Norn came back later on while Rudy was living in Renoa, but Paul was looking for Zenith, and even after Zenith came back, she was brain dead and Paul was regular dead. So the three of them never got to have an ordinary childhood together. Which, by the way, can I just say that I love how grounded and realistic Rudy having to take care of Zenith is? How many isekai are there where the main character has to take care of a disabled parent? None, because isekai make this picture-perfect view of life instead of having the main character live a normal life. But anyway, back to the two sisters. Norn spent most of her young years with Paul and looked up to him for always protecting her, and Aisha spent hers with Lilia, and then when they were 10, they were sent to live with their older brother. And I mean, for a while, they kind of had an ordinary life. Norn and Rudy went to school, but I'm talking about them living together all at once with their parents. Plus, Aisha still never went to school or really had any friends her own age. It sucks because it created a gap between Norn and Aisha, where Norn didn't like Aisha because she was better than her at everything, and liked Rudy, and Aisha didn't like Norn because she was clumsy and bad at everything. And even though there's this whole subplot about Rudy trying to treat the two equally and not favoring one over the other, I'm gonna throw that out the window because I love Aisha. Remember how I said Eris is the best female my bad. Remember how I said, duh, Eris best wife? Yeah, well, I haven't been entirely truthful with you because it's Aisha. Such a smug and adorable little shit for the whole story, and the way her dialogue is written is always either super cute and sweet or extremely clever and way too smart for her age. There's always a stereotype of a little kid being too smart for their age, but you can still obviously tell that they're a child. Not Aisha. The author literally just wrote her dialogue as if she was a fully matured character, and the contrast of seeing saying these super witty lines delivered by a cute little girl was always so funny to me. Don't talk about who she got married to though, and there's no reason for you to look it up either. No, wait, stop, what are you doing? No, don't finish typing, trust me, you really don't want to. Oh god! Billy, no! Despite that though, she's still my favorite character and is the true best girl of Mushoku Tensei. Actually, I haven't been entirely truthful with you. First I said Arisa's best girl, then I said it was Aisha, but in actuality, it's Orsted. Orsted is best girl. Genuinely, if I had to pick the coolest character in Mushoku Tensei, it'd be Orsted by a long shot. It really isn't even fair. I mean, when you're part dragon, the most powerful person in the world, and you have this much drip, nobody else stands a chance. Every interaction with him is either extremely badass, like when he comes out of the forest covered in scars during a second fight with Rudy, and the way he calmly comes in and is able to kill Rita with barely any effort, or his interactions are the cutest shit you've ever seen. Yes. Cute. I just called Dragon God Orsted, second world power, although technically first because the actual first world power is sealed, sworn enemy of Hitagami, strongest warrior of the Dragon Tribe, cute. It's the fact that he's terrifying that makes him cute. This foreboding man that makes everyone who sees him terrified, and his god rank in every single school of magic and swordplay, is also socially awkward and isn't above playing catch with children and giving them piggyback rides. Orsted knows every possible secret and legend there is in this world. He knows everyone's individual fates, and he can easily possess any worldly desire, yet he still watches over Rudy's family and gives his kids piggyback rides. Like if that is not the cutest fucking thing to you, then I don't know what is. And his fight with Alec too, oh my god. And maybe forgetting something, but I'm pretty sure it's the last big fight in the series before the ending and the epilogue, and god damn, it is satisfying. Alec is made out to be impossibly strong and full of confidence, the third world power, fighting in this weird way that manipulated gravity and is hard to counter. With the efforts of Alec's father, Ruijerd, Eris, and Rudy all working together, it's really enough to defeat him. After Rudy kills him at the bottom of the ravine, you're thinking, god damn, that guy was relentless. But then he comes back after the final fight with Bodigadi, I don't know how to pronounce that, like a fucking cockroach, and you're thinking, oh shit, what's gonna happen? For the second time in the story, Rudy's hair has gone gray from how much magic he's used, everyone else is wounded, they've got no fighting power left, but then Orsted comes in and goes, trust me bro, I got this, and he just casually whips out the strongest sword in the world and fucking demolishes Alec with barely any effort, and it's so goddamn cool. To see Orsted casually defeat Alec, who just kept coming back no matter what was thrown at him, and essentially just make Alec his bitch, was so cool. And after a long ass intense fight with Bodigadi, it was nice to have a short and sweet one that showcased just how badass Orsted is to end off the whole battle. And real quick, as a side note, that Bodigadi fight in the Fighting God armor, oh my god. In my head, I could see and feel everything happening, the characters going past their limits and fighting with everything they had, all the spells flying everywhere. Yet in actuality, I was staring at a screen at 4 AM in complete darkness. It was such an immersive fight. And the fact that Rudy used Paul's sword during the fight, man, that shit hurt. So, I gotta say, it's kind of ridiculous just how many world powers were involved in that final battle. It was literally all of them except Laplace. Further, gotta continually add that it's ridiculous that all of the world powers are essentially immortal except for the sword god. How do you expect a little pissed baby human to compete with immortal demons who've lived thousands of years and immediately regenerate after taking any damage? And that's taking into consideration the fact that humans in this world operate at a superhuman level of strength and speed compared to humans from our world. It's just insane, the extent of strength in this world. But to somewhat wind down the video, I'll talk about my least favorite and favorite volumes. I did kind of ruin the series for myself since I binged all of it back to back, so this story that was intentionally and carefully separated in 26 different volumes became blurred together into like this constant chain of events. And honestly, if I was put on the spot to provide a summary of everything after the anime, I'd probably skip a lot. Like, let me try. Alright, 3, 2, 1, go. Rudy goes to the city and he tries to improve his reputation, but he doesn't, and then he goes to the Magic University and he meets Ariel, fucking least horny Azure Noble, he meets Ariel, he goes to the university, he meets with Sophie, they got a house together, he goes Yoshi's mom gets Roxy, and then fucking Paul dies, and then Eris comes back, and then Oldius, and then Eris comes back. Fuck. Now, you see what I mean? Even though I've read the entire series, I still had to go back and review when specific things happened chronologically or in what volume. There was a lot of, oh yeah, that happened, I forgot about that while researching for this video. And while doing said research, I remembered a volume that I had entirely forgotten about. Volume 19. I'm sure there are some small, significant moments you could point out, but bro, I'll level with you, I am not about to reread an entire fucking volume of a light novel just for a single point in an over 30-minute video. I've got other things to waste my time with. If you forgot like I did, Volume 19 was the one that was all about Zenoba going back to Shirone, even though he knew it was a trap set up by Pax, and I'll be honest, I did not care. I like Zenoba as a character, but the last time they went to Shirone was in Volume 6, I think. And come on, ain't nobody fucking reading Mushoku Tensei like, man, this oldie story is great, but when are we going back to Shirone and visiting Pax? I can appreciate it for giving some character moments for Pax and Roxy, and the fact that the whole story acts as a setup for later on in Jobless Oblige when Sieg meets and befriends Pax Jr., but an entire volume of a story shouldn't have to be supported by a side story set years after the main story, and in just the context of Mushoku Tensei itself, Volume 19 feels kind of pointless, especially since they went to Shirone specifically to keep Pax alive, only for Pax to end up dying anyway, so it was literally entirely pointless. Volumes immediately after 19 though, oh! If you're like me and you can't remember specific volumes 20 and 21 are the ones where Rudy takes Zenith and Aisha back to Millis to visit Zenith's mom Claire, and I feel like this whole arc is extremely underrated. For once, it was cool and almost scary to see Rudy honestly get pissed and attack people after his talk with Claire, and even later on, I remember he was standing outside their gate thinking to himself, I could fuck up this gate, it'd barely take any effort. And to see him finally acknowledge the level of power that he has and how he could very easily just abuse it if he wanted to was such a cool character moment. Later on, when he gets in a fight with his aunt and her knights, it's so fucking rewarding to see Rudy finally be able to flex all the little tricks he's gathered so far, like summoning the magic armor and lightning magic and disturb magic. It was awesome to see how much his combat gradually changed and improved over the story without you even realizing it. I read that part thinking, man, the Rudies from back in the anime would have lost this fight in a fucking heartbeat. But those two moments are just the icing on the cake. Oh god, why the fuck did I write this? The pre-cum of what actually makes volumes 20 and 21 amazing. Through both volumes, Claire is very obviously the villain and there's nothing redeemable about her. Like, I read this and I knew the author would eventually show her side of the story, so I tried to sympathize with her in any way, maybe see where she's coming from, but no, the whole time I was reading I kept thinking, fuck you, Claire. How are you gonna marry off your daughter when she's a vegetable? How are you gonna treat Aisha like this? Like, there's no way any of this behavior could be justified. So when it finally gets to that courtroom scene and she's being taken away by the guards, you think, yeah, finally, she's getting what she deserves. The whole time she's oddly quiet, and you think, alright, whatever, I mean, it's kind of weird, but she's probably just too much of a coward to admit what she did or apologize, fuck her. But then Cliff says that the whole thing is wrong and Rudy should rethink it, and you're like, wait, hold on, what? Cliff has always supported Rudy's decisions, like why is he so against this? It's obviously the right decision, but then Zenith comes up and bitch slaps Rudy and you're like, alright, choto fucking mate. And you finally hear Claire's side. After 2 volumes, you finally see her motivation as to why she's been like this, and you start fucking sobbing. Claire didn't want to do any of this. She looked for as many alternatives to help Zenith as possible. The only even somewhat likely solution was to have Zenith sleep with a bunch of men. Even if there was only one previous example of it working, even though it goes entirely against her strict religious beliefs, even though she knows how shameful it is, even though she knows it would ruin her social standing if people found out, she still decides to do it, just for a small chance to have her daughter back. How? How does he do it? How does the author so accurately write from the perspective of a strict, noble mother who wants the best for her daughter, when he himself is obviously not that? Eventually, Rudy clears up the misunderstanding and says that the story Claire read isn't true because Alina Lise is the woman in that story and she never got her memory back. And he decides that, you know what? Even if I don't agree with what you did, I now see that you were operating on a misunderstanding and your intentions came from a place of desperation and caring instead of pure evil. It was such a satisfying payoff for the 2 volumes to know that Claire wasn't just this cartoonishly evil person, that she actually had her own emotions and motivations you could sympathize with. It's a great way to show that even with all his experience reasoning and communicating with people, Rudy still makes mistakes, and you can never be 100% sure of a situation, only view it from your perspective. But all of what I just said still is not all of what makes volumes 20 and 21 amazing. Then you have the reveal that Zenith has turned into a Miko from being in the magic crystal for so long, and she's still conscious of the world around her and is happy with life, and she's even aware that Paul died. But then you get the Gisu reveal at the end, bro. Oh my god, these volumes were so good. And with that, I rest my case. If you couldn't tell, I really enjoyed Mushoku Tensei, and I'll be flat out honest, I made this video as an excuse to get out all my thoughts about it. I'm not trying to convince anyone to like Mushoku Tensei or make an objective claim that it's the best story ever. I just really love it and had a lot of things to say about it that were stewing in my head for a while, so I thought, fuck it, why not make a video about it? Who the fuck's gonna stop me? Nobody in my personal life has finished the story, and I'm not about to force them to read it or make them sit there while I ramble about it for 4 hours. I fucking hate talking to people like that, so why not make a video about it? That way I can have a healthy outlet and can potentially start a conversation with other people who've seen it and enjoyed it, or people who didn't enjoy it, so I can get another perspective, because again, who the fuck's gonna stop me? That's it. If you liked or disliked Mushoku Tensei, let me know. I'm obviously very open to talk about it, and don't forget that best girl will eternally be Orsted.